The Pacers get completely embarrassed in Toronto, easily their worst performance of the season so far, in a nearly 20-point loss. And it wouldn't be a Pacers game in Toronto without an injury occurring, or in this case, too, easily the worst night of the Pacers season so far. And lots to get to on today's Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers as always. My name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and the West Side Community News. And today, oh boy, do we have a lot of sad and upsetting Pacers stuff to get to, because in their short season, it was easily the worst night of the Pacers season as they go into Toronto and lose 118-100. But the game never even felt competitive. 2 Pacers injuries. Carlisle throwing out stats he has yet to tell us that he tracks during games because the Pacers stunk in those categories. It was an extremely forgettable night for the Pacers. So there's a lot to get to, and I wasn't really sure where to start with this. When there's a lot of injuries, when everybody stinks, when everybody plays, a lot of the topics from this season spring up again in this game. I wasn't really sure where to start, but let's just go over what exactly happened in this basketball game. So the Pacers actually started off playing okay. They were right in it in the first quarter and into the second quarter. They're actually winning by, I think, 3 midway through the second quarter, right? So for a while in this game, it looked like the Pacers kind of knew what they needed to do to beat the Raptors. But in the first half, we saw a lot of what the theme of this game is, and I'll get to that in a second, pop up. And the Raptors rode that theme into halftime, where they were up 8 at the break, and then they just completely dominated the second half. Pacers got it to 6 with about 8 minutes to go in the third quarter, and then Raptors dominated the rest of the way. They're up 23 at times in the fourth quarter. I mean, they just looked so much better than the Pacers. And you want to look at statistically the things that matter in a very, very, very broad sense, beyond just shooting percentage and stuff. The possession battle in this game just screwed the Pacers. You look at net possessions, because in basketball, points per possession is often referenced as a stat. And I always talk about how a lot of teams try to maximize the points. But in this case, the Raptors won by maximizing the possessions. The Pacers, 19 fouls, which gives the Raptors a ton of easy possessions. They got to the free throw line more than the Pacers. The Raptors had 16 offensive rebounds, right? That led them to winning the rebound battle, despite the Pacers grabbing 31 of the Raptors' misses. 16 offensive rebounds. That's 16 extra possessions. And the Pacers coughed that up 22 times, 22 turnovers. Everybody who played had at least one turnover, except for Isaiah Jackson, who barely even handled the ball. So it was just a forgettable night for the Pacers in that way, and that every way you'd like to see a team try to win a game, they did not do well in. They shot better from the free throw line. They shot better from the field. They were, kind of passing well. Half of their makes were assisted, a better percentage than Toronto. So their actual efficiency with what they were doing was okay, but they just got completely punched in the mouth in the effort and possession battle department, and it allowed the Raptors to just dominate and completely take the Pacers out of a game. They barely had any rhythm from basically that, like I said earlier, that midpoint of the second quarter on, where the Raptors could just do whatever they wanted and made the Pacers look uncomfortable and unprepared for this game. Chris Duarte said after the game that basically the Raptors were just, he said that the Pacers weren't prepared. Right? They got outworked. His exact quote was, "They just outworked us and played harder than us." And Chris Duarte, a dude who has worked hard every day since getting to this Pacers team, that was jarring for me, at least, to hear come from him. So I mentioned a theme of this game that I thought kind of was the tide turner, and it wasn't that hard to tell what it was if you were watching this game. I've brought it up several times on this podcast throughout the years of this roster construction that the Pacers have had for the last 2 seasons plus 5 games now. They suck at defending stronger, bigger forwards. And I always bring up Mikal Bridges and Harrison Barnes, and the third guy I always bring up, OG Anunoby, who had a 30-point game against the Pacers last year, and he was just completely unstoppable in this game, especially in the first half. I think he had 16 points in the first quarter. Anunoby finishes with 25 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, and 5 steals, hits 40% of his threes. I mean, he was just a beast in the first half. The Pacers had No answers, none. They tried a lot of stuff. They put a big man on him. They put Justin Holiday on him. With the second unit, they tried Jeremy Lamb and Brad Wanamaker for some reason on him at times. If you can see me on YouTube, my hands are in the air in exasperation at that idea. Those guys did not work at all. And the guy you would think would be the answer, Torrey Craig, who Carlisle has lauded his defense since he joined the team, as has the defensive guy for this team, Lloyd Pierce. He didn't even play until the fourth quarter, and then he played the entire fourth quarter. Scott Agnes was going to ask that after the game. I had it in my notes to ask, but Scott was about to ask it, so I removed it from my notes, and then Carlisle had to leave his presser, so we didn't get an answer. But I was curious why Torrey Craig did not get in earlier in this game. Maybe we'll find out in the coming days, because this is part of the appeal of him, right? They've stunk against this kind of player, this archetype of player, so often, and they have not had the answer. And now they have the answer on their bench, and they don't go to it. So Carlisle tries a lot of options. None of them really work. I think the best option he had was O'Shea Brissett, because the bigs weren't working. Sabonis couldn't get into his game tonight. Turner only played 22 and a half minutes again, despite no fouls. We'll get to that later as well. Lamb and Wanamaker weren't doing it. Justin Holiday is way too thin, right? None of those options made sense. O'Shea seems like the best option, and he fouled out, was a minus 22. I don't even think O'Shea played as bad as his stats look, but he just got stuck in the unfortunate situation of defending OG Anunoby on a night that he just had it going, and the Pacers had no answer for him. So that was the theme of the game, is something that's haunted the Pacers for years, pops right up and haunts them again, despite them having a different answer just sitting on the bench. And Isaiah Jackson, potentially another answer, also didn't play until the fourth quarter. We'll talk about him for an extremely unfortunate reason later. And the other thing I want to get to that was the theme of this game, Nick Nurse was asked about defending Domas Sabonis before the game and how to do it. And the Raptors figured something out. And they've always done pretty well at slowing down Sabonis. They've been one of the best teams in the league at making him uncomfortable. Recently, ironically, another one is the Bucks, who they just played on Monday. But this was the most out of his game I've ever seen Sabonis in a game. He finished with 9 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and 4 turnovers. One of his worst stat lines of the year, minus 13 with him on the court. The Pacers were tonight. The Raptors just figured out what to do against him. And maybe it was Nate Bjorkgren's influence being an assistant for the Raptors and knowing Domas's tendencies so well. But the Raptors just had an answer for everything Sabonis is good at. They would force him to post up really deep, so his passing options were much harder, and it was easier to cut off those angles. They would not let him catch the ball near the basket at all. They were, as soon as he caught it, the double would come, and it would come from the correct side that he always turns towards, or typically turns towards. He couldn't go baseline because of the positioning they were getting those doubles from. They just defended him so well. And for this Pacers team, that in the first 4 games, a lot of times when their offense looks the best is when they're able to get the ball into post positioning and then play out from there, or move it from there, find cutters from there. They could not get any of that going through Sabonis. We'll get to another player later that I actually thought played a pretty good game, especially in the first half, that was getting into those positions, but it was not Sabonis. I have never seen, I think, especially since he became a starter 3 seasons ago, but maybe in his full time with the Pacers, I've never seen a team make Sabonis as uncomfortable as the Raptors were able to do in this game. It was impressive, and they did it with guys who were smaller than him, right? I talked about him yesterday previewing this game as like, Sabonis could just dominate, right? The Raptors have changed their center rotation to some smaller, thinner guys. Sabonis could have an opportunity to just put their butt on those dudes, back them down, and score. The Raptors' defensive plan did not allow that to happen at all. They were putting Scotty Barnes on him, who started at the 3. I mean, he's a bigger 3, but started at the 3 for them. They tried to OG Anunoby on him. It worked. Achua did all right on him defensively. Chris Boucher did all right on him defensively. But it was more of a team effort. You know, I can't put it on one guy and say, this is why the Raptors defended Domas so well, or this is why they didn't defend Domas so well. But it was still just jarring to watch a team take him out of the game to that extent. I don't think we have seen that in a long time. And, you know, when Turner's only playing as little as he did in this game, and they're asking so much of Sabonis and he can't do it, all of a sudden the Pacers' usual advantage, or one of them, is that they have these talented centers, and they got no advantage from that position in this game, hardly at all. So they were forced to win in other ways. And, you know, their only player who really had it going got hurt in the third quarter. We'll pivot to injuries momentarily. And they just had no chance from that point on. The Raptors took over, found a way to get it done, and just kept rolling with that game plan. So forgettable night for the Pacers, in that one of their biggest problems of the last few seasons popped right back up, and they couldn't stop OG Anunoby, that stronger center. And their counter typically to something like that, running it through their best player. They could not do that either because the Raptors totally took him out of the game. So credit to the Raptors. Their game plan was excellent, but sometimes it's not game plan. Sometimes there's effort stuff involved. I have a note on that to get to later in the show too. I have so many topics written down to cover from this game because so much just happened in a bad loss. That is what we're talking about for the Pacers, and they're 1-4 now. This is their worst start since the Paul George injury season in 2014-15. They finished 38-44 that year. They're a better team than that team is. They had a brutal schedule on the road for 3 of 5 against decent teams. I know they're not good teams, but decent teams. They're missing 2 starters. The back-to-backs, they have another back-to-back this weekend. A ton of road games in November coming up. So they needed to do a better start than this, and they didn't. And it's only going to get harder. And it's just a tough spot for the Pacers right now. Let's take a break, talk injuries, talk more about this game because there's so much to get to from the game we just saw. But first, guys, let me tell you about the great folks over at rockauto.com, because with the ever increasing number of makes and models, there's now 2023 cars out on the market. It's still 2021. It's impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. You got to go in there, look around for it. It's never in the right section of the store. You got to go through the questioning of what your car specifically is and what year it is, and then they just order the parts and you have got to go back and get them. Don't waste your time with all that when you can just go to rockauto.com and save time and money. They'll have all the stuff you need for cheaper. You can order it straight to your house. They're a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Their prices are always reliably low for every customer, and they have everything you could possibly need for your car or truck. Go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the easy solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck, right? How did you hear about us? Right? Locked on, in their How Did You Hear About Us box, so they know that we sent you amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. And let's also talk about the good people over at BetOnline.ag who are back and better than ever. They've got a new web interface for the start of basketball season and more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Or over at BetOnline.ag, the number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Their new updated desktop and mobile website. If you sign up on there today, you can get a 50% welcome bonus on top of your first deposit. Just use the promo code LOCKEDON when you sign up. Again, they've got basketball, props, football, baseball, postseason, the World Series going on. Go Astros. I can't believe I'm saying that. NHL, boxing, UFC, your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers that BetOnline has for you. It's the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, maybe the big story from this game. We will see how this shakes out. But his injuries, yikes. Karis LeVert did not play. Carlisle said before the game they're still working him back. I'd imagine he will get debut this weekend, given where he's at, given what he's doing, given that he was listed as questionable for this game. I'd imagine he's back very soon, either against his former team in the franchise he used to play for, or at home, debuting at home against his Toronto team that just kicked the Pacers' ass. So LeVert did not play mid-third quarter, and actually the Pacers were right in it until this happened. And this is a big, for the Pacers getting their butts kicked, this is a bigger moment in this game than people are talking about because of how just depressing this game was. But Pacers are down like 6-ish in the third, and then Malcolm Brogdon is just off the court all of a sudden. During a replay review, we didn't even get to see really what happened on the broadcast. Brogdon, injury, left hamstring injury. Carlisle did not know if it was like a pull or a strain or what it was after the game. He was still he was still getting that information at that point. He just called it a left hamstring injury. He said unknown severity, but Brogdon left the game. The original announcement from the team was just not returning to the game. So it was the third quarter, so there wasn't a lot of time left, but it was at the point where they said, nope, no chance he comes back to play. You hate to lose Brogdon. Brogdon was probably the best. No, I'm going to cut that probably out and just say it. Brogdon was the best Pacer playing in this game. He was 7 of 13 from the field, getting to the line, 5 assists, 5 rebounds, only 2 turnovers, which is still 2 turnovers, but much less than he had against Milwaukee. He was actually controlling the offense. His defense was a little questionable at times on Fred VanVleet, who had a big game for Toronto, but he was buoying the offense in a way that no one else could for the Pacers at all, right? Getting to the foul line, even So he was easily their best player. He still finished their leading scorer, and he only played 21 minutes and 48 seconds. And Brogdon finishes as the Pacers' leading scorer in this game. So he was their chance. He was in the game for a little bit in the first half when OG was out, and the Pacers made their push to get the original lead, right? If he was healthy and could have played through some of the third quarter in the fourth in those same instances, perhaps the Pacers could have come back or at least made this game way more interesting, right? Even late in the third after he was hurt, they were down 8. Let's say he's playing at that point and the Raptors bench comes in and Brogdon can still play. Maybe this game goes a lot differently. So not only was his injury devastating because it's an injury, but in this specific game, it was incredibly damaging to what the Pacers were trying to do. And of course, right when LeVert's coming back and the Pacers are going to be finally having 4 starters at the same time for the first time in forever since like February of this year. Nope, we go right potentially back to square one. We'll see where Brogdon is at. But again, ruled out right away, unknown severity stuff. I don't have a ton of info, but my intuition would be that he misses a little time. Hamstring stuff is always a little tough to gauge, though. And Brogdon typically misses a game or two with little injuries like this. So I'll just guess he misses a little bit of time. And this is why they have a guy like Wanamaker on the team, who we actually will talk about later as well. So much to talk about from this game. McConnell's going to have to step up if he's out. But honestly, if he misses the Brooklyn game, you should never rush Caris LeVert back coming off of a back injury like this. But if you were 90% sure you were going to debut him in this game anyway, and now Brogdon might not play, you might maybe just want to do it just to have the best chance of winning. The Nets look kind of vulnerable right now. So we won't get to see LeVert and Brogdon still, but perhaps not a better time for LeVert to come back than when they really need him to handle the ball with the first unit. So tough injury timing there. The other one, much more awful looking live. We still don't have information, but Isaiah Jackson, it looked like needed contact. People were saying with Sabonis. I unfortunately just didn't see who it was with, and then they kept the camera on him, no replay. Well, he was on the ground, but he was on the ground right on the sideline when the Pacers called a timeout. Had to be carried-ish, like he had his shoulders up on 2 trainers, back to the locker room right before halftime. So Carlisle, that was right at the end of the game. There was only like 2 minutes left, so not even enough time for testing to Carlisle give us more information. So, he couldn't have known at that point. He just said it was being evaluated right at the start of his post-game presser. So we have no info on what happened there. And Jackson, if you're talking about how this impacts the Pacers in terms of winning and what they're trying to do this year, accomplish their goals of improving on last year, very little, right? He had a bit utility role against the Heat where he was a little effective. And, he actually he played almost the whole fourth quarter of this game because the Pacers needed his juice so bad. And he actually played okay, right? He gave the Pacers some good minutes and some especially good defense in this one. So I suppose he could have been sniffing an opportunity coming up, but he wasn't really in the rotation. So in terms of their short-term winning impact, I would say little impact on their season, depending on what the injury is. But it certainly hurts his development time, which absolutely sucks, especially with the Mad Ant season starting very soon. They're in training camp now, Fort Wayne is, right? So he could have been sent down for assignments even if the Pacers got healthy enough to the point that they had the opportunity to do that. So depending on this severity, it could impact his development, certainly. And again, not so much the Pacers rotation, but just any injury to a promising young rookie is always devastating. And now the Pacers will certainly have to lean on Goga for their depth big minutes if they need it. And hopefully Jackson, this is nothing serious, but it didn't look great during live action. So we'll see what that one is. It's a little harder to gauge exactly what the deal is there because he couldn't get a ton of info from Carlisle. The other thing I wanted to note in this section, I'll get to something positive. Can you believe it? Something positive from this game. I mentioned earlier that in the absence of Sabonis being able to be the guy who is not dominating, but getting some paint touches and making stuff happen, someone else that was TJ McConnell, who I've been clamoring for on this show to play a little more like the old McConnell with this Pacers team. He's playing in the Carlisle system, so he's going to play differently. That's fine. I don't care. Carlisle's smarter than me. His offensive schemes have worked for every team he's been on. Change things up, do your thing. McConnell is a little too much behind the arc for me still in this system. So I've been saying, try to get him driving more, make him be the guy getting paint touches, spraying the ball out, and creating that way, 1. And 2, he's really effective at that little fall away 8-footer, 5-footer. And he's been going away from that shot a lot this season. Well, tonight he went back to it, hit a few of them. He was 4 of 6 from the field, did not take a 3, still finished with 3 assists, right? He was making it happen a little bit. He was getting into that paint, getting those assists, getting those shots up that he was so good at. And he was a big part of, again, Him and Wanamaker were actually in the same lineup. He was a big part of that group that pushed the Pacers into this game in the first half. It was the best stretch of McConnell's season to me, was that stint he had in the first quarter and second quarter. In the second half, when he was filling in for Brogdon as a starter, and the Pacers got their butts handed to them by Toronto, once Brogdon got hurt, he did not look nearly as effective. But I will say I wanted to talk about McConnell a little bit, just because he finally had a stint where I said, okay, that's the guy that Carlisle should be trying to get from TJ McConnell every single game. That's what they should be trying to make him do every time, because the Raptors, even with all their length, they had to just turn a little bit of their angling to see what he was doing, or they had to send a tiny bit more help his direction because he was in the paint and could score. So other guys were open. His shots were a little more open. He just bent their defense in a way that no one else really could in this game outside of Brogdon for a little bit. So I thought that was the best stretch for him this season. And I know his second half was rough, but I think that's something replicatable. And I talked about this on a podcast. I think it was the first post-game pod of the season after the Hornets game. But one time I talked to McConnell during the last McMillan season about, he was really rough their first couple games that season, right? Even though he took Aaron Holiday's spot, he was turning it over more and kind of running around, not knowing where his teammates were, not being a good creator. And then he figured it out. And he kind of was like, yeah, it took me a little bit to figure out my teammate tendencies. And it was a new team for him that year, coming from Philly and stuff. So I wonder this year, even though the team is mostly similar, if it's a similar situation where this system is so different than anything the Pacers have done offensively before, and a different play style for him than his strengths, that if he's got to kind of figure out where guys are going to be, the tendencies and the timing of this system, and once he gets it, he'll look more like the McConnell we've seen in past season, because we finally saw a glimpse of that in the first half. And I think that's important, because the Pacers' second unit has not been nearly as good this year as it was in past years. If they can get him going, I think that'll go a long way in that way. A couple more positive-ish things, although it's mostly about bench players, that I want to hit on. Coming right up, Isaiah Jackson's positives before the injury, Torrey Craig's minutes, Brad Wanamaker stuff, and that Carlisle stat I mentioned at the beginning of the show. I want to talk about that. But first, we got to talk about two great groups of people. First up, the good people over at Postmates. Do you smell that right now, guys? That is chicken cordon bleu, my favorite. There's something in the chicken cordon bleu you can get from Postmates or anywhere else, and it just comes straight to your door, because if you order food with Postmates, it comes straight to your door. You can get your favorite foods from local restaurants in your neighborhood delivered. You don't have to leave the house. Even better, you don't have to get in the car, find a parking spot, or in my case, lose your parking spot in your apartment. And Postmates isn't all just burritos and sushi. You can get things like toothpaste and phone chargers on demand too, because they've got places like Walgreens and 7-Eleven on Postmates. And the best part, when the app lets you know, the app will let you know when your food has been delivered right outside your door. It's sweet, never gets old. Just download the Postmates app on iOS or Android. Your favorite foods, or one thing you forgot to get from the store, you can get it delivered on demand instead. And for a limited time, Postmates is giving our listeners a little something. New customers will get 50% off your first 5 orders of $50 or more when you use the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's code LOCKEDONNBA, all one word, to get 50% off your first 5 orders of $50 or more. Max savings of $100 per order. Just download the Postmates app or sign up online. Super easy. Offer subject to change. Taxes and fees apply. Offer valid for 30 days after you add the promo code to your account. We also got to talk about SweatBlock, and some about the product, and some about how people who've been listening to Locked On podcasts on the network have tried and succeeded with SweatBlock. They are making antiperspirant wipes that stop sweat for 7 days. Sounds unbelievable, but a couple, again, listeners of Locked On Pods have had success with it. A high school teacher who was pitting out by 4th period started to use it instead of changing shirts in between classes. Huge success for him. A Hollywood producer working on a Marvel movie, working 18-hour days, heard about SweatBlock, tried it, loves it. No more sweaty production days. Soccer player, pro soccer player, using SweatBlock, thought it was too good to be true, heard about it and thought it was too good to be true, but no longer the wettest guy after practice, no more pitting out while playing. Now he's a true believer. You got to try it yourself. Stop excessive sweating for up to 7 days per use. Doctor created and doctor recommended the dry shirt guarantee, and it's not just for armpits. Anywhere else on your body that you sweat, you can use it. If you or someone you care about is dealing with excessive sweat, you got to try out SweatBlock. Get it for 20% off at sweatblock.com with the promo code LOCKEDON, or you can get it at Amazon or CVS, but no discount there. 20% off sweatblock.com, promo code LOCKEDON. So somehow the positives are going to sound like negatives, because I'm going to be lauding stretches of the game or performances from guys who kind of play bit roles for the Pacers right now. But it's important that things that happen that are atypical get discussed and called out and what they could mean going forward. And a guy who, despite what my Twitter mention said, which surprised me a little bit actually, I thought played okay today, was Brad Wanamaker. It was his second appearance of the season. He appeared against Washington as well. Statistically, Wanamaker doesn't look fantastic. 8 points, 3 rebounds, including 1 offensive rebound that got him an assist. 4 assists, 1 block, only 2 turnovers. Shot 40% from the field and hit a 3. So that was his best performance of the season. But when he was combined with McConnell in that first half, that unit was pretty good. They had a lot of ball handling and ball movement in a way that the Pacers didn't really have at any point in this game. And not only did I want to note this out because it was something different, we hadn't really seen that unit before, and that kind of came at the expense of some Torrey Craig minutes, which was surprising to me. And also, Wanamaker was not as good in the second half in general. Nobody was good for the Pacers in the second half of this game, but I think it's not only important to call that out because we saw McConnell Wanamaker together, I think, for the first time. So we get a feel for the fact that Wanamaker can play the 2 and the 1, but also, if Brogdon does miss time, Wanamaker's probably going to be in the rotation. He will likely be the backup point guard. If that is the case, even if LeVert's back and his role isn't needed to be huge, he still might be playing more just to be that guiding hand. Rick Carlisle says he likes to have veteran NBA point guards on his team. Brad Wanamaker is certainly that. So it's possible that that good second quarter stint scored his first bucket of the season. I think his first assist of the season as well could be a springboard for him to at least be a serviceable backup if Brogdon does miss time. I'm not saying he'll be so effective that it is important or anything, but someone who's just a stopgap, doesn't kill you in that stretch is pretty important. So him having a nice stretch with McConnell, one, was, I think, important to get a vibe of how that group can work and what it could be as a second unit at times, especially if LeVert is the lead ball handler with the starters going forward. And 2, just to see him play well and see what his strengths can be in a Carlisle system are good. In the second half, he was much less effective. His defense was not good for much of the game, but he had moments of brilliance in a way that we hadn't seen from him ever, really, in a Pacers jersey, and in a way that makes you understand why he's on this team and why Carlisle wants him to occasionally play spot minutes. And again, he jumped Torrey Craig in the rotation for this game, which was surprising to me, but he certainly earned his keep in this game with the way he played. Speaking of Torrey Craig, I talked about already that I was surprised to not see him play given what was working for the Raptors. Torrey Craig did play the whole fourth quarter, right? Rick Carlisle, the start of the fourth, puts out a lineup featuring Torrey Craig, Brad Wanamaker, and Isaiah Jackson. He was maybe not fed up, but didn't like the energy going on in the third and said, here's our energy group. Let's get this moving. Let's get this team moving up and down the floor. Craig played okay. Hit half his threes, hit 3 of his 5 shots. His defense was good as usual. Had an assist. Wasn't as effective on the glass as you expect from him at this point, but the Pacers actually played a decent fourth quarter with that group. I mean, the Raptors had their starters in for some of that quarter, and yet the Pacers' second 0.5 unit kept up with them almost perfectly. It was a nearly even fourth quarter, so Craig played well in those minutes. I don't know if it was a trial for him necessarily to get back in the rotation or something, but his energy certainly stood out in that time. And again, I'm surprised I did not go for him before the fourth quarter. But the fact that he wasn't in the rotation for the competitive portion of this game is noteworthy because if you listen to yesterday's podcast, we talked about how Karras' return could alter the rotation. Torrey Craig was a big factor in that discussion because his minutes fell to just 7 against the Bucks in terms of the competitive part of that game. So he looked like his spot in the rotation was kind of falling, and it looked like he wasn't going to play in this game, and then he played the whole fourth quarter as Carlisle went for a change. So still tough to read exactly where he sits in Carlisle's rotation, but the fact that he didn't play for the 3 quarters where this game was actually a battle is a little telling. And then Jackson came in. That was the true sign that Carlisle was just mixing and matching, was when he came in. He played pretty well as well. 4 rebounds, hit his first shot as a pro. His only points were free throws. Had a steal, had an insane, it didn't count as a block because it wasn't a shot. And those on YouTube can see me putting my arm above the camera space. But he blocked a lob that I don't know how he reached up and got it. I thought they were going to call goaltending, but it wasn't even a shot. It was crazy how high he jumped. So he again shows that he can be serviceable when given time. His defense is freak of nature for his age. I don't know what his rotation spot will be because he's like the 12th guy in the pecking order for this Pacers team, and that's why minutes in Fort Wayne might have made sense for him going forward a little bit. But if this injury is anything serious and he can't play, that is the takeaway for him in this game. Despite him finally having an extended run as a pro in a regular season game to really get a feel for what Isaiah Jackson can do. We don't get to talk about too much of the story of what he did, even though he did play okay. And instead, the story is what's going to happen with him going forward. Completely unfortunate that he got hurt. It's terrible. I mean, he's just such a spark and unique talent for this team. And the thing I wanted to talk about that was interesting to hear from Rick Carlisle after the game to close this podcast, the Pacers got smoked, completely smoked. You could tell everybody who did media, which was Carlisle, Duarte, and Jeremy Lamb. I haven't even said Jeremy Lamb's name. He had a pretty solid offensive game, 4 for 6, but couldn't guard it, OG Anunoby, for anything. And the Pacers and post-game media clearly frustrated. And Rick Carlisle always does opening comments. And one of the things he said in his opening comments is, there were 12 loose balls in this game, and we got 3 of them. I had no idea that Carlisle and his staff tracked loose balls. That's cool. Every coach has some stat that they track or that they have their assistants track that's unique. And this is the first one we've heard from him. He tracks loose balls, or someone on his staff tracks loose balls, and who ends up with it. And 3 of 12 he thought was unacceptable. 9 of 12 for the Raptors. And I saved this for the end, and maybe I should have included it earlier when talking about how the Raptors dominated the possession game. But 6 possessions is like, you get probably 1.1 to 1.2 points per possession as an NBA team. That's 6 points you just leave on the table. But it's not 6, like, let's just pretend the Pacers got 9 and the Raptors got 6. That's not plus 6 possessions for the Pacers. It's also minus 6 for the Raptors. That's really a 12 possession sort of difference in terms of points in the game. In an 18-point game, you never know how much that could have mattered, right? That could have been a huge deal. So I'm not saying the Pacers were lazy or anything like that. They were certainly fighting for a lot of this game, but you go back to what Chris Duarte said after the game. The Pacers got outworked and the Raptors played harder than them. That stat certainly seems to back that up. So I think the Raptors focusing on that possession battle and outworking and out-hustling the Pacers for this whole game. Carlisle noted it and had a stat for it, and that's really the story of why the Pacers lost this game. They just got their butts kicked in the effort game, and that's so rare to see from the Pacers, and it led to the Raptors having more possessions, and that's where they won the game. The per-possession points were probably pretty close for these teams. I don't have that stat in front of me, but the total possession game, Toronto ran away with it. So really terrible night for the Pacers. Their first just flat-out bad performance of the season. Even though they lost by double figures to Milwaukee, they played okay. They played good in their first 3 games. So we'll see how they respond against Brooklyn. This is their first chance under Carlisle to respond to a bad performance, and they get another crack at Toronto on Saturday. So tomorrow, Sean Woodley from Locked On Raptors will join me to talk about this game and Pacers-Raptors over the weekend, and then I will sneak in a segment as well about the Nets and what to watch for in Pacers-Nets if Karis LeVert returns as well, and how the Nets are doing right now. So look forward to that tomorrow. Thank you guys a ton for listening. If you need more from me or the show, you can find me on Twitter at TEastNBA and this show at Locked On Pacers. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.